Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. And this is probably an intro that Kaylin never would have expected to happen, alongside introducing her as a very special guest today. So, of course, you listened to the pod already, Kaylin, and you've just completed your first prep. And I do believe the pod was in your ear for a majority of the time of your prep. So thank you for coming on, first of all.
No worries at all. Absolute pleasure to be here.
And of course, you being post-show, and it wasn't that long ago that you competed, it's such a surreal time, and we'll talk about that today. But it's just going to be great to hear about your story as a bodybuilder. But of course, something I talk about on the pod a lot is sometimes people don't look at individual genetics and sporting background. Now, you've come from a sport of gymnastics, so that would be really cool to sort of understand what actually went into that at a young age to get to a GB standard, and how that's then transferred into where you are now.
Yep, absolutely.
So where do we begin? What age were you when you started gymnastics?
I was 8 years old, which is actually quite late to begin competitive gymnastics. But yeah, obviously from a young age, I was always cartwheeling about the house and, handstanding and different things like that. And then my mum was a bit like, oh my God, she's got so much energy. I need to put her into something. So obviously started gymnastics. It was acrobatic gymnastics. So got into that, and literally it was I was just natural at it, and then started competing, and then I just had this inner drive that, wow, I want to be the best. So and then probably I think by the time that I was 12, I was at a really high standard. So I had Scottish championships and British championships under my belt. And my coach then decided, right, okay, we're going to go for world trials and try and be selected for Team GB. So
cool. It's such a gymnastics, swimming, most sports that you get into a young age. I think that sometimes maybe people skim over it and think, oh, I've dabbled and I've done a bit, and that would maybe help bodybuilding. And yes, it can do. But when you do it to a level that you've just described, I do see a very strong correlation with successful bodybuilders, that there is some sort of sporting background. So it's really interesting to hear that it was from a young age. But even there, you said it's like almost a bit late, but you had a natural talent. And of course, I'd imagine this transfers into the discipline that's needed to even complete a prep, right?
Oh, absolutely. So obviously when my coach decided, right, okay, we're at a standard now that we can actually start trialing for Team GB. But I mean, at that time was really, really hard. You were constantly getting put down. When I actually got selected for Team GB just before the World Championships, I was getting told that, this is just a fluke. People from Scotland shouldn't be in Team GB.
Yeah, got this, yeah.
So I think that my mindset from obviously such a young age was just no, I'm going to prove people wrong. So we used to obviously travel down to Lillishall, which is the national centre for sports. And I remember once my mum actually came with me after the training camp, she said to my coach that, if Kaylin turns around to me tomorrow and says that she's quitting this sport, I am not going to stop her, because it's, the way that were treated wasn't obviously too great. But I had this mindset and this determination that no matter what other people thought, I knew that I could do things to the best of my ability, and I was going to go to the Worlds and I was going to try my best, and I ended up coming third. So
yeah, it does. It definitely feeds into that. I guess we both find this, that external pressure is tough to deal with, but I guess we're both quite fortunate from our talks that we're in a spot where it doesn't necessarily affect us. But when you're exposed to that at a young age, even in early adulthood, it builds this resilience which lends itself so well to bodybuilding. Because we've spoken about it, when you're in a prep in the darkest of times, no one else is there. You have to do it. And that is, of course, resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think my mindset was definitely built back then, just to continue to push through. And again, like we've spoke about as well, Sarah, going into a prep is your choice. And again, me competing in the sport of gymnastics was almost my choice. I remember I would come out and I would be howling, I would be crying, and my mum would say, just quit. I'm like, no, because I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like, so even from that, like, such a young age, like, it was always, it's my choice to do this. So yeah, obviously it kind of just everything that I learned through the sport of gymnastics definitely gave me a really good starting point when I moved on to bodybuilding.
And you did CrossFit before bodybuilding, is that right?
Yes, so that just kind of fell into my lap, I think, obviously, again, because of my gymnastics background. So it was more so just like, it was just a pathway almost that I could still keep up these skills, still keep up like the competitiveness. So I done CrossFit for probably about 5 years.
Okay.
In 2022, I went into the Open, managed to secure a place in quarterfinals, and I also came 13th in the world at the occupational games. So that was like, basically, if you're, obviously I'm an ex-police officer. Police officers all over the world basically compete against each other. So yeah, I came 13th in that. Which obviously loved the competitiveness of it, loved just pushing my body, loved the daily grind. But then my back basically gave in May 2022. So that's why I had to just kind of look to move my focus and shift my mindset to something else, which then became bodybuilding.
I actually love that about bodybuilding, because mine's a similar thing. I was doing triathlon and my back was just, I was pushing against it, and it was like, actually it's got to a point where it's going to end up extremely detrimental to longevity in any sport. And then it was like, actually, you know, bodybuilding on the face of it, it's quite a controlled, you know, you can take out compounds like squats, deadlifts, which are maybe hard on the CNS and more taxing on the body, and you can replace that with, you know, aesthetically driven machines. Like, there's options, whereas you know, triathlon, CrossFit, things like this, there's so much that can potentially lead to an injury. It's then that risk versus reward. Whereas, of course, bodybuilding has other things that we have to consider, you know, running a severe deficit and things like this. I mean, in your background of sport, did you ever visit that sort of like extreme deficit that you did in your first bodybuilding prep?
Yeah, not so much CrossFit. Obviously, CrossFit's very much like fueling your body for obviously performance. Gymnastics, especially when I was kind of at like the height of my career, it was very much like no food, no carbs. Carbs are bad. You know, carbs are terrible. And I remember that I used to get weighed before and after training. So if I hadn't lost weight, then I wasn't training hard enough. And then obviously it became a point where, again, like, my mum had to step in and just say, like, I'm not having my teenage daughter have a complex with food. Not like, this isn't on. And I think like the kind of final straw for her was, it was my birthday, and I'm a total like I have a sweet tooth. I'm a total chocolate fiend. So she was like, "What birthday cake do you want?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not going to have birthday cake this year." And my mum was just like, like, enough is enough. Yep. So she actually kind of she stepped in on that, and obviously the weighing stopped, and you know, I was allowed kind of more food. But I remember like when I went to World Championships, actually my mum like had like M&M brownies, and we left, like, she ran up the stairs, my coach followed her, and we're stuffing all these M&M brownies like underneath my bed, just because it was just like a no-go. Yeah, like, but luckily though, like, even in saying that, I've never really had like a bad relationship with food, in the sense of like, I've never been one to binge eat or like really, really restrict myself. But you know, at that time, I was very, very aware that there were certain things that potentially I could put on weight. And then when you've got that whole scenario that, you know, when you're coming into the gym, you're going to get weighed. And if you put on weight, then, you know, you're going to have to explain yourself. So that was always very much at the back of my mind.
Yeah, it's very tough actually. And we could probably explore that a bit more, because this is incredibly useful, as you know, from listening to the pod, when you talk about it from different perspectives. Now, bodybuilding, of course, the scale weight fluctuation, there's so many factors that go into it. You'll know from coaching yourself that, you know, it could be something as simple as a bit more sodium one day for a lifestyle client. The next day their weighing is up, and it's just because they've maybe had a meal out and it's got more sodium, and then there's that negative connotation with, shouldn't have eaten that because I've gained weight. And even something like that, right, it's very small. Now when you then go into competition prep and you're driving a lot of fatigue from the extreme amounts of training and the deficit you're running, etc. You know, even when, I don't know if you get it, but like if you do a leg day, you can put on a kilo or two, and it's like, is that negative? No, it's training
Yep.
information. And that there is so much to it. And I think that I've often been scared to talk about scale weight. I posted about it today because I think that sometimes people, if you say I'm X amount above stage weight or what have you, that can sort of trigger people. And the message I try and get across is, if it does trigger you, then maybe you need to talk to someone about it, you know?
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. I remember like there was one, yeah, and then like you said, like I was a full kilo up, like literally within the space of like 2 days. Like I said to my coach Amy, I was, oh right, okay, so like my plan needs to change. And she's like,
Yep.
no, it doesn't. She was like, because your visuals are bang on. And I was like, but like I've gained a full kilo like in 2 days. So yeah, I think it's like about being open and like, you know, speaking about what's going through your mind. Because if you don't speak about that and then you try and just do things kind of on the fly or on your own and then start, you know, restricting yourself when, you know, you're meant to be following a plan, then that can lead down that you don't want to go down.
Yeah. And with the scale weight sort of fluctuations in your relationship with the scales, would you say it's ever been a struggle, or are you quite objective yourself with it?
I think there's been a few times that it's definitely like got into my head. But, you know, speaking with Amy and like saying like, you know, this is totally normal. And I think it's because there's not a lot of people that do, like when they're documenting their journey on prep, like they don't automatically take to social media to say, oh my God, I'm a full kilo up today. Like it's all, they don't speak about it.
Yeah.
So me, when like I stepped on the scales and I was like a full kilo within literally the space of 48 hours, shit,
What's
like what the fuck is happening?
happening?
So yeah, but again, I've definitely learned throughout the weeks of prep that is normal, and you know, it's not just scale weight that we go on. We go on measurements, we go on visuals. So there's other factors there to obviously consider before you need to think, right, okay, what's actually went wrong.
Yeah, when you break it down, there's so much to it. And of course, the sort of undercurrent is that, you know, a lot of the female categories, we don't actually get weighed on stage. So
Yeah.
then you're sort of like, and I must admit, you know, the first portion, well, 10 years worth of my bodybuilding, a lot of the changes were associated with, you know, if my weight wasn't going down, my food would drop. And then until I reflect and look back, it was like, that then made this relationship with food, like I'd sort of done something bad and my food would go down, and then the negativity around that then being because of scale weight, and it sort of manifested into its own negative thought process. And I know that a lot of people will struggle with this, and I think that it is important to, like you say, you wouldn't maybe see it on a post or something, so it's like, well, have I done something wrong? And this is where you need to have a coach that you trust, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And with your coach, how did you find her? It's quite interesting to talk about.
Amy was also an ex-gymnast,
Oh,
so it's
cool.
Amy. She's part of Team DW.
Okay.
So she was ex-gymnast and she also had a back injury. So when, you know, I started I had already like followed her journey from obviously international gymnast to PCA pro.
Yeah.
So I had been following her, and then when it I took the plunge to decide, right, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. It kind of just made sense. Like her journey just resonated with me because I could relate so much to what she had already been through. So for me, it was like there was nobody else that even kind of popped into my head. It was just like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go with Amy. She knows my background, obviously herself, back injury, so she knows how to train like round about that. So yeah, so reached out and obviously never looked back.
Yeah, you do. You catch the vibe, right? Like I'll have D listening, who's one of my clients, and we spoke about this on the consult, like, and we always reference it because we're like, you just catch the vibe, and it's that straight away you just know that that is the right coach for you. And of course, coming from like similar backgrounds and things, that helps. Now, when looking at coaching in this industry, of course, there's no real governing body per se and things like this. And I'm sure it sits with you like it does with me. It's a tricky spot for people that are potentially first timers like you were, or people that have got a coach that maybe isn't delivering the service that they should be getting from what they're paying. Now, maybe you could talk a little bit about your coaching experience so that people listening that are first timers maybe would know what to look for in a coach, because you've obviously become very successful in the sport.
Yeah, I think like, you know, for a coach, I think they have to be involved in the sport themselves. Like, you know, they can't just be, you know, a PT and just say the gym group. And like, I don't mean anything against the gym group,
No, yeah.
but like, you know, like they can't just be like a PT in a gym group and then like, you know, you'd go a few sessions and like, oh, I want to compete. And they're like, yeah, let's compete.
Yeah.
Because there's, you know, there's so many factors and like health implications that go into this sport that, like, you know, you have to do your research in the sense of like, have they had competitors before?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
what, like have they been successful? Like, and I know that, you know, like outcomes aren't totally why you do this sport, but at the same time, it's like, you know, do they have the results to show they are worth going with? I think, you know, definitely for first timers, if you are looking at like going down the route of competing, like, please do your research.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and even speak to their clients potentially, you know, if they've those two big factors that you just said there. So have they got the education behind that? So are they, you know, have they coached competitors before, or have they got that education behind them to potentially take you to stage? And also that other side, to have they actually competed themselves? Because that can be a very good tool, because of course the empathy side of things, right, like post show, all of these things we go through, if someone else has been through that, it does really help.
Absolutely. And obviously with Amy, she's obviously she's a PCA pro, and like there's been a few times, especially post show, like kind of 2 flexible days. So like I had like too many brownies on the Tuesday, but my plan was to be back on plan. And it totally fucked with my head. And like, and I remember, and I was getting like really angry, like with Jamie, and he was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Oh, I shouldn't have had those brownies." Like, and he's like, but Amy said, like, you know, that it's post show, Kaylin, have that little bit of flexibility. But I basically, like, I was straight onto her and I was like, "You need to send me my reverse diet now."
Yeah.
And not, and it wasn't even like, you know, the guilt of, oh, what is this going to make my physique like? It was totally just a mental thing. Like, because in my head I was like, okay, on Tuesday I'll be back on plan. But then I had these too many brownies and I'm like, oh my, So again, like, you know, just like reaching out to Amy to say, listen, like, my mind kind of wandered a little bit, like, and I know that this isn't me, but just for her as well. And she's like, listen, I have been there. Like, I have been there. It's so natural. Like, but it's because you just need to get it out your system. So just having that person there that has also been through it, like, as a coach, I think, like, you know, there's nothing better, because you know that they talk so much sense because they have lived it themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not really something you can talk to clients about this, and you can sort of give personal anecdote, etc. But then it's not really something you can completely determine what the outcome will be as a coach. But if you are there, then whatever the outcome is, you can explore it with personal anecdote. And of course, you know, that relatability and having that coach you trust. It's like, well, actually, I'm just going to be completely upfront here. This is what I've done, and I need that structure back. And there's no right or wrong, is there? You don't know how you're going to feel. It's a very strange sensation post show, isn't it?
So strange. But like, you know, since she sent me, like, obviously my reverse diet, I've just been like, right, okay, like, I've been totally on it. Obviously, so she's implemented some free calories every day, and obviously my off-plan meals are back in. But because that's implemented and that the structure is there, I have no guilt. So like my mum and stepdad, actually, they flew out to Spain. That was never planned, but they were just like, do you know what, we've got some free time, so we're going to come out and meet you. So we actually went for I had a 3-course dinner last night. So this is like my first like proper meal, and I loved every minute of it. But I know when I woke up today, I was like, okay, straight back on plan. Like, I ate what I needed to eat last night, like, and I was totally satisfied. But again, there was no guilt because it's implemented in my plan. There's
definitely that, I guess, the education behind that, but also having that clearance, I guess, from your coach to say, right, this is within a plan. So we don't know, you know, if X amount of calories are going to be in that meal, but I want you to have an off-plan meal with a starter, a main, and dessert, or however that structure is, for you to then go, okay, so the coach has given guidance. I'm still on plan, because I talk to clients about this a lot. You know, when they have off plan, we've already said, choose XYZ, and then they've done that, and I'm like, okay,
yeah,
you stuck to the plan, rather than it being like, did I have too much? Should I have chosen something else? It really does depend on what point of your
yeah,
journey you're at as well, you know. Like for you,
yeah,
you've got a pretty good relationship with food, a solid relationship with food. But if this had been a different way and it was like, okay, so no off plans or no cookies or whatever it may be, a brownie, would that then potentially lead to you wanting it even more? And that's something that I do explore with people, because that then potentiates
yeah.
maybe food relationships.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I think as well, like in my free calories, like I've been trying to have, like, you know, I'll have like a 3 egg omelette in the morning, like, and that'll be like my free calories. Just because like I didn't have eggs on my plan for so long, and I was like, oh my god, like that's where going to be my calories are. And like I said to Amy, you know, like I would rather put it towards like actually good whole nutritious foods rather than just like spunk it on a bar of chocolate. But at the same time, she was like, but Kaylin, if you want to have that chocolate in your free calories, have it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
well, it's not a case of like I'm giving you these free calories to do as you please almost.
yeah.
But obviously reason. But for myself, I think as well, I've like totally learned this new appreciation for food that I'd never had before. The journey's taught me so much about myself at the same time, really just to appreciate food.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely, me and Matt talk about this all the time. For us, we're definitely at a point where it's like, okay, so when we have a meal out off plan or whatever it may be, or even if it's, you know, a cookie at home or something like this, it's the memories associated with that, not necessarily the food. The food's nice, but
Yeah.
it's like you, when your mum comes over and it's like, oh, remember when you came over to Spain and we went to that restaurant? You maybe won't speak about what
Yeah.
the food was, you know. It's like, oh, that was so funny when that happened or whatever, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, for me it was like actually just like that experience, because it's been like for me probably about 22 weeks since I actually went out and properly just sat down and enjoyed the company
Yeah,
for starters. Obviously the food, but for me it was just like having that experience and that flexibility and balance back in my life, that, you know, I can go out, I can obviously I don't need to check, oh my god, like can I have that?
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, as you say, totally, it was the experience more than anything.
Yeah, and there's definitely merit in mentioning that. I actually had this conversation the other day with a client who's looking to compete in the future, and she said, you know, what would the reverse out look like? What would the off season length look like, and this type of thing? And it's her first time dieting down, and we had the conversation to say there is a lot of relevance on how lean you get. Now, for you, the category you did and the condition you brought, there is a relevance on that when you come into post show, of course, because it might be that, you know, your coach says to you, you've got a bit more leeway potentially. Now, and that's not me saying you have to be peeled to earn time reversing out, but there is a difference if you get very, very lean to if you go in, you know, a little bit softer.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Obviously, like, so my 5 weeks out, I was actually like put back onto maintenance calories.
Yeah.
Honestly, like my prep went so smoothly. Like for my first one, it was great. Like it's super smooth, no kind of bumps in the road. But at the same time, I'm not naive to realise that every other prep's probably not going to be like that. But at the same time, so we've still not really spoke timeline as of yet. You know, she said, go enjoy your 10 days in Spain. And I'm very cautious not to totally go AWOL. Like I enjoy my structure, I enjoy my plan. Like I'll implement my off-plan meals, but at the same time, it's like when I'm back my holiday, then obviously we'll talk timeline. Am I going to compete at the end of the year, or am I going to go straight into off season? So that's something that we still need to kind of speak about. So that again is very much in my mind, that I can't just, you know, go absolutely crazy. But I think being on prep, like it doesn't, like I enjoy so much being in control.
Yeah.
Like, and it's something that I have. Yeah,
Mm.
well, like I enjoy like knowing exactly what I'm eating, and because it makes me feel good a bit as well at the same time. So yeah, it's something that I know that I can control, and you know, it's not something that I know that I'm going to dive off the deep end. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It would be interesting to know actually in your prep, were you on a meal plan or were you following macros?
No, meal plan. So again, I've been pretty much on the same meal plan actually since I first started with Amy, like last July. And again, it was just like the quantities increased and decreased. Obviously, yeah, so same foods because I know that it worked. My digestion was spot on. So sometimes it's like, if you know that's working, why then start implementing change when you know that we don't need to?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been on the same meal plan for a year, but you know that works for me, and I've worked with Amy. So like obviously I have a sweet tooth, so you know my 20 grams of dark chocolate and my oats is something just to totally curb that. So I think again it's like it's working with your coach and really speaking about, right, okay, do you have any trigger foods? Is there anything that we can still implement on your plan that you know that when you hit prep it's easier to follow, you know, and you're not going to have like, you know, food thoughts just clouding your mind all the time. So I think that's really important as well to, like, you know, speak about your coach and find a plan that worked for me, because it was my first prep as well. I was like, I don't want to think about, oh right, okay, I need to track this. So yeah, basically Amy told me what to eat, when to eat, and I just followed it religiously.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely becomes such a tool in a prep. And I like you said there about when to eat. Now, as a coach, we can advise that. And it really does, it starts to optimize your nutrition. So optimal is a word that can be thrown around and it's like, oh, I'm optimal and whatever. But when you're in a diet and it gets pretty extreme in the deficit, optimizing your food around timings and what you're eating at certain points in the day can have quite a big impact on your physique. So preferencing carbs around training, as an example, you know, if you're a bodybuilder, ideally you like training, right? Like this is where it's that you love training. So then for you, you're delivered your plan. It's like, right, okay, so this is my food around training. And it would be like, okay, so I understand that that's to fuel my training. And then you're going to get the most out of your physique. And you also said about digestion. Now, this is a big, big thing. If you're hacking through a diet, if you're looking for the next best thing all the time, the digestion can really suffer.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. Like, so obviously I mentioned eggs there. So egg was in my plan originally, and then it was just like a total no-go. So like obviously speaking with Amy, and she was like, right, we're pulling it straight away. But then again, obviously when it came to the reverse diet, she was like, right, okay, do you want anything in? And I was like, well, I'm like craving eggs again. And she's like, right, okay, I'm going to put one in. She was like, but she was like, you better tell me if it doesn't go to plan, because then we're going to need to pull it again. But luckily it's actually been fine this time. So yeah, but like digestion's like a huge thing.
Yeah, and it's tough sometimes as a coach, because when you sort of see this sport on the face of it, it looks all cool, and I certainly, when I first went into it, was like, okay, so you've just got to eat less, you've got to train, and then you compete. But it's so much more complex, and nowadays there's so much education into digestion, sleep, supplementation, everything else, and it's the digestion is massive in physique development. I cannot stress it enough. And if you go into a prep, and I believe you're the same way of thinking that I am, you give yourself over to your coach. You do what is on the plan until you get to the stage. And I think sometimes this is forgotten. And I don't, if anyone's listening and they're thinking, oh, you know, I do diet hacks, I do this, I do that, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but maybe trying to think about why you are doing a prep in the first place. And actually, do you need to take it that far if you don't have that mindset of doing what's needed to get to stage, if you see what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Like I think for myself as well, when I first started with Amy, so we'd done like 7 months before I hit prep.
Nice.
And you know, at the same time, like I didn't really know what was underneath. So not saying that I didn't take, like, you know, my training and my nutrition seriously, but as soon as it was go time, it was like the switch flipped, and it was just like, okay, like leave nothing on the table. Like, so for me, it was like, you know, just religiously do what Amy is telling me to do. So, you know, cross the T's, dot the I's, leave nothing on the table, leave no stone unturned. But again, for me, it was just like, for her telling me exactly, like, you know, my training plan and my eating plan, it took the thought process away from me. So I just turned into robot mode. and it was nothing was ever questioned. Like, so when my food dropped. It was never like, oh, why? Or like 5 weeks out and she was like, right, we're going to need to pull cardio because my condition was just like insane at 5 weeks out. But again, I was like, right, okay, we pull cardio.
Yeah.
Like, it was just do
yeah.
until you get to that stage. But at the same time, like obviously as we spoke about before, you must fully trust your coach.
Yeah.
In order to do that.
Yeah, for sure. It is, that goes back to that researching and understanding what the best coach is for you. And also, I feel like remembering that you've got a voice in this relationship. Remember, you're paying for a service. So if your coach is not serving you to the level that's required for you as an individual, then you can push back at that. I like to ask questions. It sounds like we're the same in this regard as well. I want to know why we're doing certain things at times, but I don't question it. So I'll ask questions for context, for my own learning, but I'm not going, I ain't going to do that. It's like, I'll do it, but why is that out of intrigue,
Yeah.
It helps as well.
It was like when she pulled, like, so when she like pulled my cardio and I was like, okay, right, we're pulling cardio, and I'm like, why? She was just like, because we don't want to push you into training. And I was like, which anyway, it ended up happening anyway, but
and then you won the overall. Now, how did it feel for you? Because of course you went in, like you say there, that you went into a different category, you got moved up as it were, and then you won the overall. Was that a very surreal experience?
Yeah, so obviously we had kind of spoke about it because she's like, like your conditions just like unreal. So obviously we had so many tools to kind of play with, and like the 5 weeks leading up to the comp, that obviously and the plan was to try and stick into athletic figure. But as soon as they came on the mic to say, okay, right, we're moving a competitor up, I'm like, that's going to be me. That's me. So it was like, obviously Amy had kind of spoke to me about it previously. At the same time, I was like, okay, like, and I totally trusted like the judge's decision on that. But at the same time, like, I still have the confidence when I walk on stage because I have done everything in my power to be there. So it was totally surreal. But I think at the same time, like, in walking on for the overall and winning the overall, I was just like, that's just a byproduct of all my hard work. So
it's the cherry on top, and I describe it as that. What you put into a prep, and I say it time and time again, no one else is there with you in your head when you're putting a lot into every single day. Like, it is an endless list of tasks, but I find that if the why is strong enough, why are you pushing yourself to these levels? Because you just don't question it then, because the goal is to do your best and bring your best to stage. And there's also relevance, like you touched on, health. When you keep pushing to these extreme levels of lean, this is not a healthy sport. And there's other things that you can do that challenge you, isn't there? You could do a photo shoot or something like this, and it's still a very, very good achievement.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, like, obviously for myself, I've always been like a competitive athlete, obviously from that young age. So I've always had that competitive drive. Like, I've always had that passion for training that, like, for me, it was just right. Okay, so I've done my gymnastics career. I've done my CrossFit career. Now what? I still want to compete. I still want to be an athlete, essentially. So and again, it was all about doing to become the best version of myself. And again, throughout prep, like, there was myself and Amy, there was never any speak about like winning or anything like that. It was just like, focus on the process, because that's all you can control. So
and that I'm sure your talks around what you do for off season or whether you compete at the end of the year, they will revolve around, now you've competed and it's like, okay, so do you want to become more competitive because we need to maybe work on this? Do you want to compete again at a similar body and a similar physique? And then that will sway your sort of decision as to where you move forward. And I think, again, that's something that you got to trust your coach with, that to go, okay, so what is our next route? and why are we doing that? And if you can buy into that process and understand, then it's going to help you adhere in off season. Like, have you done a proper off season, or was that more like a before you started the prep?
Yeah, so before I started my prep, it was almost just like an improvement season. So I already had like a pretty good base.
Yeah.
I think obviously coming from that kind of CrossFit background. So it was just getting kind of used to training in a totally different manner. Because like I remember when I like my first couple of months, because obviously CrossFit, you're going in there and you're pounding your body, you're working like you're redlining every session. So then when I was obviously doing bodybuilding, and it was like, you know, the mind muscle connection, and I was like, I don't feel like I'm doing much.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, it's working. Like, so yeah, so for me, it was just mostly like an improvement season. So for like 7 months, just getting used to all the movements, like all the different exercises and things like that. But again, though, genetics plays a huge part because I already had a really, really good starting point. So
yeah, it's such a relevant thing. And you now being at a point where you've done that phase of even like establishing how a bodybuilder in inverted commas eats and trains and how they structure their day, like it's a very valuable data collection period where not necessarily you're looking to do dieting or growth per se. It's not like an extreme goal, as it were. It's like, can we lay down the foundations of being a bodybuilder, and what does that look like? Does it work for you? And it gives you that chance to, of course, build rapport with your coach, because then when you go into a diet phase or in the growth phase, you can go, okay, so they've got my best interest at heart and I trust them and I'm just going to do what I need to do.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
With thoughts of an off season, how do you feel about that? Does that feel a bit strange coming from like being stage lean to
No, I'm actually like buzzing.
nice?
Like
Good,
actually,
good.
and I think because, you know, like the first kind of 7 months, I was like, and my strength never really dropped on prep, like definitely in a few exercises, but like my strength actually kind of pretty much stayed. So now I know that I can push even more when like if I decide to, you know, to push into the off season after the holiday or what. So yeah, so for that, for me, it's like it's totally gave me the fire to be like, I know that I can dig deeper and I know that I can push harder. So yeah, but again, like the whole being like really stage lean, that I mean, I don't know how I'm really going to cope with that, but I know that I've got a good coach and I've got a good support background as well. So
yeah,
yeah,
it is a strange space because I think that maybe again it's something that people don't talk about that much. I know I talk about on the pod, but when you get to those stage lean conditions, like it's not a good way of living. Like you're not, although you can still train and do the do, you're sort of existing at times when you do keep pushing it. And especially if you're doing back-to-back shows and things like this, it starts to build high levels of fatigue, and then you come out of it, reverse out, go into an off season, and then it's like, oh, okay, I forgot what feeling normal felt like. But when you're lean, you're like, I want to stay, I quite like this, but I want to train hard. Where do we go?
yeah, I think as well, like when, like, because I was obviously pretty lean probably from like about 8 weeks out, and then like it totally, like there was some days in my check-ins and I was like, oh, I'm not lean enough.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, you are lean enough. But it's just because like I was lean for so long that it was like my mind almost just that this is just the norm, when it's not the norm because it's totally not sustainable.
Yeah, for sure. And things like sleep are affected and energy levels, etc. But I think that you sort of, when you've got the focus that you have, you reside yourself over to that is quite normal. It'd be interested to hear how your sleep was in your prep. Did that get affected?
You know, no. Like, yeah, because, and I was so prepared. I think obviously like listening to the pod, you know, doing a bit of research, like following people online, and like, you know, they're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning for like a 4 cal jelly. I'm like, oh god,
this is gonna be hard.
but like, so yeah, like I was still like literally sleeping. The sometimes obviously when like I was drinking like a lot of water and stuff, like I would get up and I would go to the toilet, but it was very much like get up, pee, back to bed, and like as soon as my head hit the pillow, I was straight back to sleep.
Routine, or did you have that sort of lockdown so you could try and aid sleep as much as possible?
Yeah. So like I would always make sure that like I was in my bed for 10 o'clock at night, and then the half an hour before, I would just like turn, like my phone would be on airplane mode, and then so that's always what I basically done. It worked for me. My sleep actually wasn't affected too much. Probably more so like so after show. Like see that week after show, I was on such a high that I was just like, I can't. Like my body was just so buzzed, and I was like, oh my god, I expected this in like the other half of the prep. Never mind after the show.
Yeah, it's very strange, isn't it? It's like there's so many thoughts and feelings that come post show, and like we said right near the start, it's completely individual. Like you can only really arm yourself to a certain degree that it's going to feel quite strange, you know, the goal is removed, etc. But again, this is why there's relevance on what is going to be the goal once you decide where you're heading, whether you're going to compete again this year, etc. What is the goal looking like? If you do go into off season, I'd imagine Amy's first point of call is going to be, let's get you recovered and then let's bring training back. And it's like, I think for some people, if they're not maybe bodybuilding for the reasons of loving training, of exploring physique development, it's going to be pretty boring to just get back to training performance. But for me, you know, when I get to this point where I am healthier, I'm like, oh my God, like I can really train, and that's enough for me as a goal. And I'm sure you'll be the same.
Oh yeah, absolutely, like that. And I remember like still even like, you know, in the final kind of few weeks leading to the show, and I actually text her, been like, I am so fucking buzzing for off season.
In it, yeah, it is like that.
Like, but again, like as we spoke about, I think it's just because now, like I know in my head that I can dig deep and I can push harder, and just like really focus on the bits that I know that I need to grow. So
yeah, for sure. And it would also be interesting to talk about how in your prep and your journey so far as a bodybuilder, have you faced any external pressures during that time?
yeah, so obviously when I started this journey, I was very much like, I'm going to document it. I'm going to document from basically kind of getting a coach and different things like that. So obviously, as I explained before, I was a police officer.
Yeah.
I had almost 9 year service just before I left a few months ago. So yeah, obviously document my journey, and I think it was more so like, you know, because I want people to look and be like, oh my god, like she's really inspiring, and like if I can do it, anyone can do it. If you put your mind to something, like, and it doesn't need to be bodybuilding, it can be any aspect of life. You know, if you put your all into something, you're more than capable of achieving your goal. And I was like, no, do you know what? I'm going to document this for other women to like look and be like, oh, do you know, that is really inspiring. So obviously latterly I was a lead investigator for the sex offender policing unit. And my DI basically pulled me in and said, like, you know, the hierarchy of Police Scotland aren't happy about you posting your journey. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, I don't really understand. Like, you know, it's not as if like I post my check-in videos and my check-in photos for any sort of like sexual gratification. You know, I do this because like I want people to follow along with me, and like, you know, the hardships, the challenges that I'm faced with, and that, you know, you put your mind to things, anything you can overcome. But no, they just went for it. They told me that I wasn't allowed to have a public account. Like I should like lock down my Instagram. It should be private. I had actually started a YouTube channel as well, and they're like, you better change your name. Like it can't be my real name. And I was just a bit like, and then it was at that moment that I was just like, you know, my values as a person no longer align with this organisation, and that was basically the final straw for me. Obviously, I love my job. But the organisation is very flawed and very, very old school, and you know, and a lot of the kind of bigger bosses are very just police minded. Like, you know, their other halves are in the police, their friends are in the police. They have no other hobbies. Like the life. But for me, because that wasn't the case, like, yeah, I loved my job, I came in and I done it to the best of my ability. However, like, I also had a life, which they couldn't come to terms with. So for me, like leading into like, you know, the depths of prep, I was like, this isn't going to work for me. So, and that was it. And I decided that I was going to leave.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, the external pressure in general is very hard, and that's such a brave thing you did there. But it does show that, again, another reason that gaining the success and what you did there, a lot went into it that people on the face of it wouldn't know, you know, stepping away from a service of 9 years, and there's things like pensions involved and things like this. And this leans into no level of security is worth you being unhappy and you targeted per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, like absolutely, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, like it was, you know, it was a tough decision to make. But like I sat down with Jamie and I was like, we're going to have to get rid of our cars. So like he had the BMW, I had a Range Rover. We sold them because I was like, like you said there, Sarah, like this isn't worth my happiness. I know what my passion is, and I know that I want to like document this journey. And I was like, no one is telling me that I can't do that. No one.
Yeah.
So, you know, for us, and now obviously we've both just got like little runabout cars, but it's what I needed to do. And at the same time, I was like, no, like my life is more important than someone else telling me how I should live my life.
Yeah, what an important message. Like, absolutely love that, because there is so much unhappiness in life that is put on us by external pressure, of course. And also, you listen to my solo pod, what we're brought up with and what we're subjected to. And then there comes a point in life where it's like there's an element of needing to take control of your own happiness, and that doesn't come easily. Like, there is situations where people are in a very tough spot, but I think that people hearing that, you know, to understand that you did that in the depths of a prep as well. So prep is hard, okay? So we eat less, we train hard, we do all of that. It is hard. And most preps, you find that you visit some sort of challenge that's on top of the prep. So what you had there, and you still stuck to it, you followed the plan, and then you smashed the show. And it's a very good message to understand that if you're doing this for the right reasons, what you face or what you can face, you can overcome it.
Yep, absolutely. And you know, like I remember when I came in and I was like, right, okay, like I'm leaving, I'm like handing in my notice, and like there was so many people, like you might like you had mentioned earlier, like, oh, but what about your pension? And I'm like, fuck my pension.
I don't care. I'm here now.
Like, you know, there is so much more to life than thinking about what if, and like, you know, and nothing is guaranteed in life. Who's to say that I'm going to even get to 60 years old and get that pension? You know, so sometimes it's all about, you know, like you literally just need to take control of the now and do what makes you happy. Absolutely.
Amazing that you have a supportive partner as well, because it sounds like he is there through thick and thin to bring out the best in you. Now, we both have previous experiences, haven't we, where we've been with partners that are maybe not of that makeup, and doesn't it just make it so, like, every day it's like, I love you, Matt, I'm a wet blanket, and I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah. I think like obviously, yeah, I was married before. I was married for 7 years. And don't get me wrong, like, you know, he's a great guy, but he actually just wasn't the guy for me. And you know, we were with each other since we were 17 years old. And like, you know, who is the same person that they were when they were 17 years old? Not very many people. So, you know, we just grew up, we grew apart, we had different visions, different missions in life. But like, you know, I would never regret that, because at the same time, it's what's now led me to be with Jamie, who is like so supportive. And I think even more so, and that's what he said. He was like, you know, watching you out on that stage, it was just like the fire had been lit. And he was like, and like, you know, I had obviously seen you through prep. He had seen me in my worst days possible, where like, you know, I would come in and there would be like one dish in a dish, like in a dishwasher, and I'd be like, that, why have you not done the dishes? And he's like, one dish, Kaylin, come on. So yeah, so like he's been through me when, like, you know, like I've just been so irritable. And but he was like, watching you out on that stage, like, he was like, I know that this was meant for you. So again, and I actually put a post up because I was like, you know, the overall win doesn't just mark like an overall win for me. It means like we fucking made it. We made it as a team. So yeah.
I love that. Is he into bodybuilding himself?
No, actually, well, it was previously, but he done Olympic weightlifting, so kind of cross. But now he's like, no, I was like, I am going to train with you. He was like, because like I am going to make sure that the next time you step on that stage, you're going to be better. So yeah, so he's kind of basically jumped on the bandwagon. But again, like I think it was, you know, anybody that's kind of watched my videos or like watched my journey, like stepping on that stage, literally like that set my heart on fire. And I think that's what the world needs. Like, the world needs more people to do what sets their heart on fire.
Yeah, because we do forget that. And before we jumped on, I told you about Matt and I moving to Thailand, and that decision was a lot of different reasons that sort of accumulated into one. But the main emphasis being on, you know, the way the UK is, the way that the vibe is. We talk about the vibe, of course, and
Yeah.
sort of striving for a better way of living, a freer way of living. And we both believe in the universe, right? Like what we get delivered by the universe, and putting out these messages. It's not woo woo. If you're giving off the wrong energies, you're gonna potentially get a lot of that back. And like you say there, setting your heart on fire. If you do a bodybuilding prep and you fucking hate it, and you get on stage and you fucking hate it, then guess what? It's probably not the right sport for you. Whereas when, you know, we watch your videos, you belong on the stage and you look like you enjoy it, and that gets very lost in bodybuilding, of course. I don't know if you did come across any sort of negativity around the show or show day from other competitors, or was it a pretty good experience on a whole?
No, like, I think the routine that I done caused a bit of like controversy.
Oh,
But
yeah.
again, I think that was people like not actually realising that, like, you know, in PCA, the team's not judged. Like, they've already put their scorecards in before I even step on to do my
People
practice.
don't realise it. It's like they've already decided, guys.
Yeah. But, like, you know, like, there's so many people that have obviously reached out, guys and girls, been like, you know, like, your sheer confidence for a first timer. But at the same time, it's like, you know, I had that confidence, but see, when you have confidence, you can have a lot of fun. And I think, like, again, though, like we spoke about, the confidence wasn't knowing that I stepped on that stage and I was going to win, because I didn't know that I was going to win. But I stepped on that stage knowing that I maximised every minute of every day that I could to be the best that I was capable of becoming.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me about
So,
back. Was that other people on social media, or
what was that, sorry?
what was the kickback about the routine and stuff? Was that on social media?
Okay, so that was on social media. Basically, like, people were like, "Oh, is this a dance and gymnastics show now?"
What? Your routine was sick.
Yeah, They were like, that, like, this isn't bodybuilding and things like that. And, like, do you know what? Like, when I decided, right, okay, like, I'm going to do, like, you know, I'm going to bring a bit of sass to it. I'm going to do something different. But I'm like, it's literally just showing people, like, my background and how that has now correlated into the sport, like the sport that I now do. So it's like almost bringing two loves together, and like for me to be able to showcase that, like, you know, there was nothing better for me. But yeah, obviously, like, the majority of people have shown me so much support and so much love. Like, honestly, they were like, "Your routine was epic," and I was like, "Oh my god, thanks!" Like, and again, like, I had no clue that it was going to, obviously, like, people were going to, like, respond the way that they've responded. I just thought, like, you know, I'll do a little bit of gymnastics here and there.
I'll just leap across the stage in the splits and see what happens. Who knows? I think that is a relevant point as well. Doing it for the reason there you described, of showing the two loves you have of your gymnastics history and what you found in bodybuilding, and combining that and doing that performance on stage, for you to get so much from doing that and sticking in your own lane, to go, that's what I want to do, and I'm going to present that and see if it gets awarded. And it did. Taking a bit of risk in life can have such a reward. Like, for you, it must just still feel so surreal that this was, you know, a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah, honestly, and I walked into gymnastics, like, so obviously, like, I'm a gymnastics coach as well, so I coach like about 20 hours a week, and so I walked into gymnastics, and then there's all my wee gymnasts, pure, like, doing all my dancing, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, this is just amazing, like, absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
So
inspiring, isn't it? This is what you want. You want to inspire people to know that there is more to life than conforming as well. You know, that message of
yeah,
follow your heart, like, do things that are out of your comfort zone, see what happens.
exactly. So, but, like, no, and like I said to you before, like, as soon as I stepped on stage, it was like, this is where I belong. Like, and it's still like a surreal that I can't really put into words. That's probably the best way that I can describe it. Like, just loved every minute of it. So yeah, I know that it's definitely a sport that has my heart now.
And I'm very excited, and I'm sure the listeners will be. And by the time this goes live, actually, you would have, I'd imagine, decided what your next phase will be. Now, at the moment you're delving into a bit more coaching yourself. So maybe you could talk about that. If anyone's listened and they are inspired by yourself, what clients are you sort of looking for and working with?
So basically it's women lifestyle coaching. I've done like obviously a bit of kind of coaching in the past, more to do with like nutrition and things. So in the past month there, I've done like a nutrition challenge with some of the mums from gymnastics, and it was them that were like, you know, Kaylin, like we really want to like stay with you full time. And I think it's, for me, it's like using my experience, using my knowledge, using my qualifications to teach people how to build sustainable habits for their health and their fitness. And like it's about building habits that are going to be with them long term. It's none of this, you know, quick fixes or quick diets that, like, you know, you could jump on a diet and be on 1,000 calories a day and like, will it work? Yeah. Is it sustainable? Absolutely not.
Very good message.
So, you know, it's all about, again, like you mentioned before, it's teaching women that, you know, have maybe that are not educated in any way to do with like training, nutrition. And it's about educating them that, like, you know, like lay the foundation of the habits first. Then we can look at, okay, what is your goals? If that may be like, you know, they want to build a little bit of muscle, or if they want to lose weight. But at the same time, it's like we have to get the habits right from the get-go before we even kind of look and dive into other kind of parts. So for me, it's just literally, it's women's lifestyle coaching and just building sustainable habits for them to be with them.
Yeah, and who knows if they then explore it to a higher degree. Definitely what you said there. And this episode is part of the fundamentals of bodybuilding, laying that first foundation of a house and building up. I often reference it as, because so important. And of course, exploring that with a coach like yourself and understanding, do I like this? Do I want to explore it a bit more? And then you as the coach, you learn the client and you can build into that. So I'm very good that this is the ethos you have. I'm really glad about that, because it's such a clear message there. And I know that you're going to be such an ace coach. So of course, if anyone has listened to this podcast and they think, oh, I've caught the vibe from my girl Kaylin, then of course Instagram will be available for messages. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do tag us on your stories, because we can then spread the word. But thank you so much, my G. You are an absolute legend.
Thank you so much for having me.
And of course, enjoy the rest of your holiday.
I will. Thank you so much.
See you later.